Hi, I'm Anatole, and this is my review of Swamp Thing Season 1, Episodes 9 and 10. So, the episodes, the episode titles are Episode 9, The Anatomy Lesson, and Episode 10, Loose Ends. And if you have been following my reviews of this series up to now, I do one review per episode. However, work stuff happened, and so I kind of fell behind. And I just thought, I didn't want to wait to review this final episode, and I didn't want to review episode 9 after having watched episode 10, so I'm just going to combine them and then include a sort of season overview. Now, my feelings on episodes 9 and 10. The good. For episode 9, they adapted the Alan Moore comic book, the famous one, because for a number of reasons, for being one of the most successful reinventions of a character, and also for taking a title that was kind of on the margins of DC Comics and then making it a sophisticated, mature title. And it all began with the anatomy lesson. And I thought that the anatomy scene was very well done. The twist that Swamp Thing is not a man in a creature's body, but a creature with a man's spirit, I thought that was well done. And because we had spent some time with Alec Holland, the ghost in the machine, in previous episodes, when we got that final twist that Swamp Thing is just a plant creature with memories of being a man, I thought that was effective. We had bought into that nature of the character because we had spent time with Alec Holland even after his death. So that was good. They laid the groundwork, they being the showrunners and the writers. And then I think another good thing about the episode 9, is Blue Devil, Daniel. I think he is probably the best written character in the series because he's given something closest to a true character arc, and the character is likable, and we get more of that superhero slash horror that is the hallmark of Swamp Thing with Blue Devil. So those were the good parts. And then let's talk about the good parts of episode 10. And for my criticisms of the series, I'm keeping in mind that this is a truncated season, that it was supposed to be 13 episodes. Instead, there are 10, and that the showrunners had designed the series with 3 seasons in mind. So I will give some leeway to things being a little contrived because they had to hurry up their plot developments. I'll give some leeway to some things being unresolved, but I will have to judge if the series on what it is, that it is a little bit unresolved, and that at the end we didn't really get the boss fight that we should have to give a natural feeling of completion to the season and the series. But with that aside, I thought what was really well done about Loose Ends, episode 10, is the fact it tied up so many stories. And that is quite a challenge to do without being really super contrived, and to make it play for the viewers. And I think that for the most part it did. Again, I'm grading on a curve because I understand that the showrunners, their hands were forced. I believe they learned of the cancellation around episode 8, maybe a little earlier. I've heard that it was episode 8, and that they filmed scenes that they inserted into episode 5 or 6, somewhere around there, because they knew they were going to have to end it much sooner than they were planning on. So the fact that they had all these balls in the air, multiple characters, and they did make them stick for the most part, okay, that was good. Now, for some of the faults of the episode, there is some really contrived moments when Liz and Abby are in the warehouse, and Phantom Stranger is trying to convince Daniel that he needs to go to save their lives. The reason he needs to go is because they are discovered, since Liz trips over a crowbar, which is just plot contrivance. If she doesn't trip over the crowbar, they aren't discovered. If they aren't discovered, Daniel doesn't need to go to save them. If he doesn't go to save them, then his whole plot line is worthless. So you can see how much was being brought to bear on that scene. And then the same example when Phantom Stranger shows Daniel, Liz, and Abby hiding in the closet, it's maybe like a storeroom, we won't say closet, and they come out and the mercenaries or rent-a-guards or whoever they are see them and shoot them. When we are presented with that event in actuality, Liz has the foresight to turn off the electricity, shutting the room into darkness. Well, if that was what was going to happen, whether Daniel went or not, why didn't we see that in Phantom Stranger's vision, other than it was kind of misleading the viewer? And then in that same episode, again and again, Abby doesn't do much. She is a scientist. She does do some investigating in the early episodes before her hands get tied by the, oh, I always forget their name. It's not Sunderland's, yeah, it's the group that Sunderland's working with. The Cabal, oh, I can't remember it, sorry. But once her hands get tied and she's let go from the CDC or suspended, she's not really being a scientist. She becomes Lois Lane and takes Liz along with her, kind of does investigative work. But where does Abby ever really have any direct agency? Again and again, she is the damsel in distress, and Swamp Thing comes to save her. So even the scene where Abby has the chance to save Swamp Thing, Liz becomes master of switches. She switches off the electricity in the storage room, which allows Daniel to do the sneak attack. Then she switches off the power, which frees Swamp Thing, and so Abby does absolutely nothing. And that's one of the complaints I have with the series as a whole, is that there is some character development. Daniel got it. We do see some with Abby. It stopped around, I think it was episode 5, Drive All Night. It's the episode where Abby confronts the friend, Sunderland's daughter, that she had guilt over. There was some sense that Abby was coming to peace with her guilt, whatever amount she had. And so once she was free of that, there should have been some sort of character development. But other than that, who developed as a character? Again and again, rather than seeing characters doing things, we had things being done to the character. So instead of seeing Swamp Thing making choices, we would just see the green communicating to him, or the green doing things for him. In this episode, he communicates that he was, all this time he just wanted to become human again, but we never saw him say that until episode 10. We never saw him do anything proactively, like trying to find an antibody to the mutagen that he thinks transformed him into the Swamp Thing. That would have shown us his desire to become human again and given him agency. Instead, he has things done to him. The green gives him the flower that allows Abby to see him as Alec Holland. He didn't do anything for that consciously. And when he makes the decision to save Sunderland in episode 9, instead of us seeing that happen, it's a decision that's already been made. So even when he does decide to do things, when he becomes proactive, that moment's taken away from us. And then the second problem I had with Swamp Thing as a character was because I'm guessing due to budgetary reasons, we don't see him enough. They had to use him sparingly. So Abby was left to take up a lot of the airtime, and Swamp Thing became a secondary character in his own show. Not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're going to have character development, you need to have character time to have that development happen. And so by the end of the series, when Abby has been in the show more than the Swamp Thing, we never get the sense that he's struggling against being a creature. We never see anything challenging him. We see Abby being challenged and put into danger. He comes to rescue her, but we never saw a threat that was equal to the Swamp Thing. The only time that happened was in episode 8 when they capture the Swamp Thing, which is good. But in episode 10, when they throw these rent-a-mercs at Swamp Thing, we've seen him defeat these kind of guys time and time again. And these guys don't have the, what's the freezing material? The chirogenic blotsome? I don't remember what they used, but they don't even have the same tools that the mercs in episode 9 had. we not for 1 second did I ever feel Swamp Thing was in danger there, and I need to feel that to feel invested in the action and the tension of the series. But that was always lacking. There was never that challenge. And so when we had who should have been the two true big bads for the Swamp Thing, Sunderland and let's just call it now the Floronic Man, that was something I had been sitting on. I am a fan of the comic books. I've read them. And so I was aware there are people watching this that may not have read the comic books. So I never said that Jason Rudru would become Floronic Man, even though I knew it. That would have been a true challenge. In the Alan Moore run, the very first series, the very first arc, has Floronic Man really putting the screws to the Swamp Thing. He becomes a true challenge to him, since both of them are from the Green. But we don't see that. We get a hint at the very end, after we already know this series has been canceled, that the Floronic Man exists, but we needed him sooner. He should have been the big bad of the last arc. Maybe that was the showrunner's intention. But because that never happened, and Sunderland never truly challenges Swamp Thing, except for when he gets captured in episode 9. Episode 10, we have no real threat for the Swamp Thing. So that was another sort of weakness, that there was no true building up of the character Swamp Thing, and then nothing to create jeopardy for him. So that was a missed opportunity. I'm going to give the showrunners the benefit of the doubt that that last arc, they had intended that the Floronic Man was going to be the big bad. That would have made a lot of sense. And there may have been more time for that resolution to the conflict with Sunderland, who was also a true big bad or a true villain for Swamp Thing. So those are my thoughts, the good and the bad. Overall, more good than bad, but it was a missed opportunity. The good things about the show were underutilized. The characters were not developed enough. The horror was hit and miss when they did really lean into it. I thought it was very well done. And I loved the first arc. The first arc was great, those first 3 episodes, and then episode 5, which may have been the one where Abby and the Sunderland's wife, I always forget her name. I want to say Maria, but I don't think it is. They have the whole possession thing, and the evil spirits, which we believe might have been the Rot, are trying to take over Sunderland's wife. That was a great, also, horror episode. But for the most part, a lot of the horror was sublimated by the plot, by the mechanics of the plot, which I don't mind. If there had been more character development, I think that would have been better. And oh yeah, there was one other good thing I wanted to mention, and that was I thought this show was more true to the characters of the comic book than many other TV shows and movies have been for superheroes, which is good. I think that changing the characters is not a bad thing in and of itself, but often it's a symptom that there is a creative behind the scenes making the film or making the TV show who is not a fan of comic books and was hired to do the show, comes in, and then because they have no affinity for these characters, not having read them in the comic books, they just arbitrarily change things and miss the point. And I did not ever get the feeling for that in this series. I felt that the people making it knew the character, had read the comic books, and came to it from the right place. And so where there were deviations, I didn't mind it because I trusted the people behind the scenes, the people directing the show. So that was also a good thing. And that's about what I've got. So that was my brief review of episodes 9 and 10 and the series as a whole. It's a tragedy that it got canceled. I did enjoy it. And maybe if there had been the final 3 episodes, some of my complaints would have been addressed within the series, and then I could have had a much more positive overview at the end. But coulda, woulda, shoulda. That's something that we won't know unless maybe there are scripts or that are leaked for what would have been those final 3 episodes we never saw, or the show Bible. Anything, any sort of leak could confirm or overturn my idea that the show would have had a better conclusion. That a lot of my misgivings come from a rushed ending. But we won't know until maybe there is a leak. It would be nice. It'd be nice to know. Anyways, if you have thoughts different from me, if you had a much more positive a view of the series, or maybe even a more negative, critical one, please leave comments. I would like to hear from you. For anyone who stuck around to my final review of the series, it would be great to hear what your thoughts are. And that's all for now. Take care and be well.